Aspire Instructor Training Book Club. Reading together, growing together. Welcome to today's episode of the book club, and today's book we're going to be talking about is An Introduction to Coaching Skills, a Practical Guide by Christian Van Nieuwerburgh, and I hope I got that pronunciation right. I'm joined by the lovely Terry Cook, the OG book club guy, and we're just going to have a little chat about this coaching book and have a discussion about how we both found it, what we took from it, and what our key takeaways are. So, how did you find the book, Terry?
I think this book does exactly what it says on the tin. It's an introduction to coaching, and so I think it fits nicely into two little categories. I think it works perfectly for someone that's quite new to coaching. I think that's probably who it's aimed at, if we're being honest, but I think it works really nicely with that. But I think it also works really well as that kind of refresher, because I know as I was going back through it, I'm like, it was nice because there was something going, oh, I do that. Yeah, I do that thing. That's a good thing. And then there's always, I'm like, oh, I think I might stop doing that so much now. Probably should reflect back on that, And so I think it works well for what it is.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've read a lot of coaching books. In fact, I've read a lot of coaching books that this book refers to in the notes, and I actually like this book for how it's structured. It's really just like a how-to book, how to coach. And I hadn't really thought about it, but the title kind of going into it, the title does give it away. It even says it's a practical guide, and it very much is a practical guide in the sense that it doesn't just talk about the concept of coaching. It really gives you stuff to go away and work on and try out in obviously you have to kind of twist them a little bit for your in-car scenarios, but it really gives you sort of key things to go away from. Is there anything you kind of particularly took away?
I mean, I'll just touch back on, like you said, the structure there, and the gives you things to go away and learn, because it literally does in the book. It tells you what to go away and learn. It's got those segments that are like, go and practice this, get this coaching journal, get this learning journal, and then go and do this. And I think that in regards to the structure of the book, I struggle with textbooks. I get bored straight away with textbooks, and this book is laid out like a textbook, so I struggle with that. You've got like a paragraph of useful information, you've got a picture, then you've got a video, then you've got some suggestions of what to do, then you've got another paragraph. Like, just put it all at the end for me. But I think, do you know what it was? I think the big thing for me here was, as I'm reading it, it's like, how does this fit into what we do? Because this book is, not only is it a book on how to coach, the book is written in a coaching manner. It's really forgiving. It talks about what we should be doing. I'm going to phrase that slightly differently, because one of the things that annoys me about our industry sometimes is we'll get trainers that tell you have to do this and you have to do this and don't do this. And if you don't know this thing, you're the biggest loser in the world, blah, 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 blah. Oh, shut up, right? You profess to be a coach, but then you shout at everyone else for not doing the thing. You've got this really judgmental vibe about you. And this book doesn't have that. This book feels non-judgmental as you read it. You read it thinking, oh, that's a good idea. And, oh, there's no pressure on this. You're kind of telling you what you should be doing, but saying it's okay if you're struggling because you're learning. And I really like that feel of it. And the other aspect was, like I kind of mentioned before, how does it fit into what we do? Because this book isn't written for driving instructors. At one point it talks about the kind of the where your coaching session will take place, and it's like talking about a sofa or the chairs, and make sure the chairs are the same, so someone isn't in more of a position of power than the other. So it's clearly not designed for in car. You're not designed for when you're going around a roundabout. So it's like, how does this fit into what we're doing? And I think the big thing is that risk management, because it's not designed for you to go around a roundabout. So there are times you can't coach. So we have to take the principles from this and then apply it where we can into what we do. And I think the book kind of says that without saying that. It's one of the things that I liked about it.
Yeah, I think that's always going to be the battle with coaching is that you can't coach mid roundabout. But then in my mind, that's not coaching anyway, because even if you were, let's take sport for example, and you were coaching like tennis from the game of tennis, you don't coach mid rally. Your coaching is the conversations and the reflections pre and post the rally. You let them then play the rally and have the experience, and so that's kind of what we do in the car. Is we have the coaching at the side of the road, set up the scenario, and then go and have the practical experience. And that's where our risk management comes in, where we then keep the situation safe. So I sort of, I'm 100%, this is not what you were saying, but I don't buy into when people do say you can't coach in the car because it's too, because that's not, I think maybe they don't necessarily understand the concept of what coaching is. Yes, absolutely. I'm not going to be asking a pupil about their thoughts and the feelings, like just before they exit in the roundabout, because it's not going to end well. But that in my mind isn't what coaching is. When you talk about the structure of the book, and I think actually not so much the structure. I love the structure of the book and the way that it gives you those like stuff to take away. And I 100% agree with what you were saying about how there's no pressure on it. It's like go and try. It literally said like this is go try this and then reflect on it, like from a coaching point of view. And it's not saying like this might not work for you, which I absolutely love. But I actually like the way that they've laid out coaching with these like three in the book. It's like three little circles like in a triangle together. And it's you've got your conversational framework, your coaching skills, and then a way of being. And for me, that sort of kind of really hit home because it's kind of what I talk about, but I've never brought it like in that concept that you have your framework, which is like grow and those sort of kind of acronyms and I think that can sometimes really be helpful when you first start coaching is having a oh actually if I tick these boxes I'll probably have a decent conversation and then as your coaching gets better, you're able to maybe not need the framework, and you might find that your conversation will be a bit more fluid. But it's when you first start, it's absolutely really helpful to have that. Then you build your coaching skills, so you're listening and your question techniques, and then it becomes a way of being. And I've said this quite on our workshop quite a lot, where it you can't do coaching. You have to be coaching, and you have to genuinely believe it. And I always talk about the fact that you have to really believe that learning comes from within, and be genuinely interested in your pupils' ability to solve problems and come up with solutions. Because I think if you don't believe that, then it doesn't. Your questions will naturally gravitate towards your solutions and become leading. And so I think you have to believe it, otherwise it doesn't. You end up forcing it, and it doesn't quite work.
Yeah.
Is that like? Did you quite like that sort of kind of conversation, that the little framework there?
Yeah, completely. I think that again, using that principle, they use the grow model and they say the GROW, this is what we use. However, these are some other options. So it doesn't feel like they're saying you can only do this. It's like these are options and there's more out there. And then to touch back on what you were saying as well, like it's the role that we play. So we don't play the role of a coach if the student's about to pull out in front of a truck. We play the role of Superman, and preventing death. That's the role changes there. And I look at it as well and I think of when, for example, students at first come to a lesson, they may not be expecting a coaching session. And even if we tell them that beforehand, this is how I work, this is what I do, they may have no idea what that entails because they've just come from school. So that first coaching session to them they may not enjoy it. They may find it hard. Being coach or being a coachee is really hard sometimes because they're the one doing all the work. Because they ask us a question and we say, well, what do you think? You turn it back on them. And I think sometimes it's easy to give up. And look, this is me. I found it easy to give up when I first started applying this stuff because you turn the question back on them and they'll say, well, you tell me you're the instructor. And okay, well, this clearly ain't working out. I'm going to go back to being a driving instructor. And in reality, it's like, okay, this isn't working now at this time. And I can remember one student we made a deal. And I said to him, okay, I'll tell you what, how about we do this? I will ask you for your feedback, but you can always say to me, I don't want to give you any, you give me mine. And I think within a couple of lessons, they just were giving me feedback when I asked for it. But at first, they were going, no, actually, I don't know. You would tell me yours. But over that couple of lessons, it changed. So I think that that's what this book is giving us. It's giving us that the process, a formula, a basis, a basis of where to start. And I think that that's a really good place, and it's giving us the tools to then go and play and experiment a bit and evolve and try this thing and try this thing and work with the grounding of that formula you mentioned.
Yeah, it's interesting. I wish I'd stumbled across this book earlier because I read like Coaching for Performance and In a Game of Tennis, which are normal, and this book refers to both of those. Um, and in a way, I'm assuming they came first, and then the author of this book clearly learned from those books and has then referenced them. But for me, those books are really in depth, and I think this book. You said earlier about it's great for beginners, and I think it is, but I think also it's great for like I know coaching, and a lot of it for me was reaffirming in this, but it is also there was bits where I was like, actually, yeah, that's like next level. I think I could use that a bit more in the car or in my PDI sessions. So, but I think for me, it's the I wish I'd have stumbled across it first, and I think anybody listening to this who maybe wants to know more about coaching, I this is probably now the book I think I would send them to first because I think it really just simply lays it out and says this is how it works. And I think I don't think after reading this you can't come away with like not really knowing what to at least go and start trying. And I think that's it says that in the book, like you said about how it allows you to be a novice. Because it even says like when you first start this, it's going to be hard. There's a section in that it talks about telling your clients that you're new to this, and I think that's something that we should be doing as PDIs, is like as saying, or even as an ADI, and you're now going to start coaching, like you said earlier in your conversation with your pupil, like I'm going to try this sort of kind of thing. Let me know if it's working or not. And I think that's quite important that if we do start a new style, oh, my dog's gone mental. Um, Neighbors have just come home. And so I think if you do start this new style, let your pupils know because otherwise they're going to be like, "Who's this person with all these questions?" and suddenly wanted my opinion. So I think it's really nice that it lays it out in that way, and I think it is really. I think it'll be my new go-to.
I
Um,
mean, just touching on that, I can remember when I think it was just after I'd passed, or around about the time I passed my part three, the old style PSTs, that I'd heard about this client set of learning. And I can remember the first unit I tried it on, and I was like, okay, we've got this new thing we're going to try today, and basically I'm going to ask you what you want to do. And I can remember she said, oh, I prefer this. And that was the first person I ever, so I got off to a good start with that because I didn't have the negativity. I remember it went on from there. But I agree. I think this book is, imagine this book as a 1-2 punch with who's in the driving seat. That's where you start. Who's in the driving seat and an introduction to coaching. You put them together as a PDI or someone that's trying now to get into coaching and client set of learning. That's your 1-2 punch to kickstart your client set of learning right there.
yeah, no, absolutely. I think, and I already recommend it in the driving seat to my PDIs, and I think this will be the other book now. Um, Interestingly, they're both actually written quite similarly, I find, in their kind of instructional way. And I'm pretty sure probably like well, I was going to say Jed and Claire maybe took a lot from a book like this, but actually it's just from the concept of coaching, isn't it? Really,
Yeah.
so that's what this book is the concept of coaching. So it's really really interesting. Have you got any key takeaways you want to talk about, or would you prefer my quotes that I've got ready?
I think that there's a couple I'll mention because kind of one that you touched on before was the idea of you become a coach, and I think that's right. I think that that's what the book emphasizes. It's you don't just coach, you become a coach. You have to buy into it. I do think there's roles we fill, so whether it's, as I said before, the truck pulling in front of you, you don't coach, you stop us dying. Whether it's hosting a podcast, you don't coach, you're having an interview, you know. But when you are doing that coaching role, you have to buy into it. You can't fake it because if you fake it, then it just doesn't work. The client won't, I shouldn't say client, should I? Your student won't buy into it. You won't buy into it. It's not going to work. And I think they get that across really well in the book that you have to believe in this stuff for it to work properly. I think that there probably is ways to fudge it and kind of get around it, but no, I think for it to work properly, you've got to buy into it. So I agree with what you said, Dan, and I think that the book does a really a good role of emphasizing that. And I think another one that stood out to me, there's quite a big section around summarizing and paraphrasing, and I'd completely forgotten this when I reread the book, and it was really interesting for me because I'd not heard any other coaches speak about this that I can recall. I may have forgotten, but I've not had anyone else speak about this. So it was quite refreshing to read that again. And it's one of the things where it's made me stop and go, oh, I don't know if I do that. And I started reflecting back on lessons, and I'm like, I do sometimes, but I think I'm doing it without thinking. So maybe I need to pay more attention to that because it's all well and good doing stuff subconsciously. I think that's a good thing, but it potentially means that there's times I'm missing it. And I think that they kind of went into that in a good detail, the difference between summarizing and paraphrasing, and also what the benefits are. So yeah, I think they would start for me the idea of becoming a coach and summarizing and paraphrasing, and then also right at the beginning of the book, and it kind of drops this in throughout the what is a coach. It asks you for your opinion, and it states quite early on that there is no law, there is no rule as to what a coach is. And that's one of the things that sometimes hampers the industry because there is no definitive. You could almost say anything. The Gareth Southgate apparently is a coach. Read into that what you will. And I think that so you can play around with that. So it was interesting just thinking, oh, actually, yeah, that's right. What is a coach? How can we massage this into what we do? So I realize I've just thrown three takeaways at you there, but they were the three that kind of stuck out to me the most.
Yeah, it is interesting. I do think that we need to make it work for the industry. And my way of doing that generally is that the coaching is the conversations that set the goals for the lesson, the analysis at the side of the road about what has happened. That's when you're in coaching mode. On the move, I think you're an instructor on the move. Um, and when I say that, I don't mean necessarily you're telling pupils stuff because absolutely you're asking questions, but your Q&A on the move generally is not coaching conversations. And the way I would relate it is because if I was driving down the road with someone and I'm driving, I would not want to be being coached at that point because
Yeah.
the coaching tends if you're having a good coaching session and you're asking the right questions your coachee should be really thinking about their answers and therefore shouldn't be driving. So I think that's my way around it it is the coaching happens at the side of the road and then the instruction or I don't even call it instruction, I suppose. I think it's the experience because we talk a lot about experimental learning, and so it's the experience that's happening on the move, and you're part of that experience by supporting, basically. That's the way I sort of kind of go about it. I was interested about the whole what makes a good coach because there's a whole section at the back with like the way of being which is the like becoming a coach and I love the list and they describe each one but I do love the list of what they say they're not necessarily saying the best coach I think the words are the most effective coaches are and then they list a few things and I'm going to read the list out and then I'm just intrigued about what your thoughts on this person if I like it is because so the most effective coaches are humble, are confident in their ability as coaches, care about people, believe that their coachees will achieve more than their potential, treat others with respect, have integrity, and demonstrate sensitivity. I'm just picturing that person And actually, without naming any names, I think I can picture certain people within the industry who list that like would fit that box, and that makes me think, yeah, this is right because those are the people I would gravitate towards within the industry because they tick all those boxes and because they are effective coaches, and I think would you like that person?
Well, is what I'd say, right? Excluding me and you,
Yeah.
let's name names. Who's the first person that comes to mind?
Oh, Bob.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, mine was two, and I realised that you can't have two thoughts at the same time, but I kind of did. Bob was one, and the other was Emma Collington. They were the two that came to mind for that. And who wouldn't want to be coached by Bob and Emma Collington? That you talk about 1-2 punch. That's all right, tag team there.
Mm.
And yes, you look at that list, and do you know what? The word that springs out first was humble. And you spoke then, I don't want to be overly negative when I say this, but you spoke then when you think of some of the people in our industry that stand out. When you think of the opposite, think of the people that put themselves out in an industry that don't tick those boxes. And the one that stands out, I'm not going to name names for this one, but the one that stands out immediately is that humble, that word humble. Think about how many people that put themselves out there that do not come across as humble at all. It's yeah, that's interesting for me. But yeah, who wouldn't want to be coached by that person?
That was the thing for me. I think it, and actually, I'm going to chuck in Chris Benstead in this list as well because I think actually when I read this list, he was one of the names that came to mind. He definitely ticks all those boxes as well. Um,
Chris is only humble when he's on camera.
yeah, when he's sending me messages on Facebook Messenger, it's not. So the but I think for me, I read that list and I would then look at that list and go, which parts of that list can I improve myself
Mm.
on? And I think that's quite a nice if you're looking for some sort of self-improvement, what a great bunch of triggers to sort of like forget about your standards check triggers. Like these are the triggers that I would be marking myself against and trying to improve myself upon as an instructor, as a coach, as a human being, I
Yeah.
think is the key.
Skills and behaviors. We've got all the behaviors there that we can work on. And I think part of that falls into creating that learning environment for the student. You know, if they're coming into a car and you're giving it the big I am, well, they're going to be less comfortable. They're going to be less inclined to share their opinion because they share their opinion and you go, no, that's wrong. Or actually listen to what I've got to say because I'm more important. They're going to be less inclined to share their thoughts. Whereas if you go, oh, that's interesting, tell me more. Or, you know, however you want to phrase that, they're more likely to engage. So all those listeners, I'll admit I forgot the list now, but all the list you described there, that list creates that pleasant experience in the car. You know, that there's a section in the book where it spoke about the emotions that can come through coaching and tears. It specifically had a paragraph or a section on tears. And I'm thinking, do you know what? Most of the time where my students have got upset, it's not always after they've done something wrong driving. It's the follow-up question as a result of that. And you know, I had that last weekend, and I'm like, you really need to stop crying because there's people walking past and they're going to think I'm insulting you, you know. And it's interesting, but they feel comfortable to get upset because they're in that environment that they consider safe, and that becomes as a result of that list that you just listed there.
Yeah, the crying the tears one was interesting because it was and it just talked about just allowing space for it, like not trying to stop it, not
Yeah.
trying to um comfort them, not trying to say it's okay, don't like you'll be fine, all of that stuff. It's just allow the space, and then when they're comfortable to continue the conversation, you continue the conversation. And yeah, I love that because I'm not good with tears, and I think now I'll be better because I know I can just do what I probably normally do, which is just like awkwardly be silent. Um, but now I know awkwardly being silent is allowing them space to
Oh
deal
no,
with their tears.
I make awkward jokes. You know, like I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. I've no tissue. What are we doing? You know,
Yeah,
this is
put on streets, dry your eyes, mate.
I won't go that far. That's callous even for me.
Um, there was a quote here that I wanted to sort of kind of bring in and discuss because I think it's so we do a coaching session on our workshop, and this is the thing that I think people struggle with the most. And so I kind of wanted to bring it as a quote and then to see what your thoughts are on. So it's in the middle of the reality part of or no, the options part. So the options and reality bit, maybe, I suppose, of Grow. And it says, in fact, many novice coaches report that having the answer can get in the way of genuine listening. So I see that a lot in the industry because we are experts in what we're coaching. And do you find that difficult actually in your lessons?
Everything, not just lessons. I've got one of those brains that goes into thinking mode as soon as I shut up, and I have to quieten my brain down. And well, never mind thinking. I'm thinking while I'm speaking. I've got one of those brains, so I do struggle with that, and it does hamper me sometimes. And I have to quieten myself down. And one of the things that I picked up from this book that I think will help me going forward, that it talks a lot about um, more important even than listening is demonstrating that you're listening and letting the coach the learner, see that you are paying them attention. And I think that that's something that will probably help me because if I put more focus on displaying that I'm paying attention, that's going to help me listen and pay attention. And it's only natural that we're going to struggle at some stuff. Like the book says, we're learning, we're developing, we're not going to be perfect from the outset. Well, we're never going to be perfect first and foremost, but even at the beginning, we're not going to be perfect. And I'm picturing back now to my lessons. I'm thinking when I pull up at side at road, how do I sit? And I'm thinking I twist straight away. I'm twisting towards them, and but then it's like and the book even talks about this in the section on there. But it's like their body language. It's like right, well, if they're actively looking away when they're talking, I'll start to twist back around a bit, so I'm not facing them as much because they don't want to look at me for whatever reason, or whatever the situation may be. So yes, it is something that I struggle with. It is a challenge that I face. I'm sure it's a challenge a lot of people face, but it's like anything. If we own it, if we go, right, this is something I struggle with, I need to try and improve with this. I may never get out 10 out of 10 on it, but I may bump up from a 4 to a 7, and that's going to be better. And so I think that acknowledging that we're not as good at that and then trying to improve it is the only way forward.
And I think it's a lot harder when you know the answers. You don't necessarily know the best answers, and you don't necessarily know the best answers for the pupil, but you know some answers. And I think that happens massively. My suggestion for this was someone who struggles with this because I found this helpful actually, and it's something we so on during our workshop, and try not to promote the workshop, but it just happens on the workshop. We do a coaching session, and we very much didn't want to have role play in the workshop because we don't like neither of us like role playing. 90% of people don't. So the coaching session is genuinely coaching each other. So we ask people to come with some sort of life goal or something they want to improve. So you may come and say, I want to build on my work, my podcast or whatever it is. And it has to be non-driving instructor related. And it's really interesting that one, there's two things that happen. One, I find it a lot easier to coach somebody when it's nothing to do with like anything I know. So we do a demo at the start and I coached one of our attendees recently, and he wanted to be he wanted to improve. He's in like an amateur wrestling, and he wanted to become the champion of the company. And I'm like, I have no idea about this, and it made it so much easier. And I actually heard myself coaching better in that conversation than I do when it comes to like helping a PDI out because I didn't have any answers for him, so they had to come from him. Whereas with a PDI, I'm like, well, this guy does this, and I've done this before, and so it's so easy when you know the answers. But the other thing I found that was really interesting when we see people do that is how they then still want to give answers, even though they have no idea about like this would probably work for me. And yeah, they've got no. There was a conversation I remember. Somebody wanted to improve their financials and some guy started just kind of chucking out ideas, and I paused them and sort of said, well, "What do you think?" And he said, "Well, actually, this time frame or something." And he started talking, and I was like, "There's no way either of us would have come up with that answer because we didn't even have a clue what it was about." And I think that's easier in my mind when you don't have the answers. I think when you do, and you like, I've been doing this job for 18 years. I find it difficult to not go, I know. And I think it's so much easier. Yeah. And so I think maybe if somebody is struggling with that, maybe find a friend or something like that and say, do you mind if I just do a couple of coaching conversations with you? Because I think you'll find that ability to hold back and that ability to sort of kind of ask those questions that you can then maybe mirror while you're first trying it out in car situations.
I mean, it could work. The only throwback I'd have to that is that I do a bit of that. I do a bit of coach on the side around other stuff, and being honest, it kind of makes it worse because it's like, oh, that was really interesting. I knew nothing about that. Now I need to go back to a lesson and talk about the clutch, and then it kind of is going back to that. But I think, but no, I could see why that would work for some people. I think the other thing, or one thing that works for me, and I don't know if this would work for most people, and I'm not saying it's the right thing to do, but it's one thing that helps me is having like allowing myself a little release valve now and again. So if I've got a 2 hour lesson, every now and again, I'll just let myself go on one just for a minute or two, and I'll throw some ideas out there. I'll be a bit more, talky rather than questioning and coaching. And then it's like, right, I've got it out of my system. I can go back to normal now. And as long as I can, and I think people understand why I say this, as long as I can do the coachy bit for 40 minutes and then have like a 5 minute spell where I let myself off leash a little bit and then rein myself in, I think that's okay. Because who was it I spoke to? Oh, there was someone on one of my podcasts I do recently where I said that if I'm doing this 80% of the time, Ian Greenwood, and I said it to him, if I'm doing that sort of 80, 85% of the time, he's like, no, that's fine. If you're running your sessions like 80 to 85% of client centered and getting their feedback first, and you've got like 10 or 15% where you're chipping in, that's a really good ratio. Don't worry about that. And I think that sometimes we worry too much about the one thing rather than looking at the whole session. So that 2 hour session, were we a really good coach for an hour and 40 minutes? Yeah. Then does the other 20 minutes matter? Not really. Crack on and have a good day.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's that striving, isn't it? You strive for excellence, but you are okay with doing well, basically. And I think you should always be striving to be better, but I'm okay. But also, like you said, on reflection, yeah, we did a pretty damn good job,
Yeah.
which is quite a nice way of sort of kind of looking at it.
It's like passing your standard check with 50 out of 51 and then moaning that you didn't get 51.
Yeah, I know someone who did that. So, um, yeah, so what I was going to say about the solution thing, and you were talking about having your like little rants, and I think I was wondering if I get that from doing stuff like this. Like this is where you don't have to coach, and you just get to give your opinion and do solutions. So maybe we have that outlet quite nicely lined up for us. Is there anything else from this book that you would like to mention before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I think I just encourage people to read it, even if you are an experienced coach, or let's rephrase that. If you believe you're an experienced coach, I'd still recommend reading it because you might pick up something new. Or like I said with me, there was a couple of things I mentioned the summarizing, paraphrasing aspect that made me reflect a bit on what I've been doing and oh, can I improve on that? So I think it's really good for that. But especially if you're newish to this, I'd really recommend it then. But yeah, I think I'd just recommend people to read it. It's not the cheapest of books, it's they price these books properly. So, it's not one you're going to pick up for the 99p sale on Kindle, but they price it properly, but it's worth it. So go out and invest in yourself with a book like this, and then also attend to the book club live next time.
Yes. The yeah, it's interesting with the price range though, because and there was a couple of things you kind of said there, and like I think as a beginner, and I don't know how this book has done this, But as a beginner, I think it's brilliant. But then I see myself as being a pretty like good at coaching and help other people do coaching, certainly in the car. Yeah, I read this and sort of still took quite a lot from it and thought, actually, I need to do this differently and I need to maybe do stuff different, but also actually when I'm explaining coaching methods, I picked up some ways that I can explain it better to PIs. So I think it does both, for whoever the sort of like a really good example of the fact when I announced this that we were doing this book was Bob Morton went and bought a new edition of this book. Now Bob is a coaching guru,
Yeah.
and so if he feels like it's going to benefit him, I feel like it could pretty much benefit anyone. So 100% I think we should, and we always say this on the book club, don't we? That it's like people should go and buy these books, but it really is a good book.
Well, no, I'm going to chip in one last thing there because you mentioned about you don't know how the book does it. It just washes over you. It's like reading Our Mutual Friend or anything by Dickens. It's not hard to read. It just washes over you. Whereas you'll read some books. I love fiction. I'm a huge Stephen King fan. But his books at times you have to stop. You cannot. I mean, maybe the people are different, obviously, but I have to stop reading King at times. It's like, right, this is hard. It's hard going. Great, amazing, but hard going. I need to put this down. But I could read Dickens or Bronte in one go. That washes over you. And it's like that. It just washes over you. It feels nice. It feels non-judgmental. It feels like you're learning from every page, or at least gaining something from every page. And I don't want to like blow too much smoke towards this book. But yeah, just a really nice read, especially for a textbook style book, which I'm not usually the biggest fan of.
Yeah, and it's that mixture of a bit of information. It gives you further reading. It gives you tasks. It gives you stories of like this is so it's a nice sort of kind of mixture, which I think is similar to in the driving seat did a similar sort of kind of style. And we haven't even mentioned the fact that there are accompanying videos that
Yeah.
neither of us have watched. But I'm looking forward to go and have a look at those so you can see um, demonstrations of what they've just talked about in practice, which I think will be really helpful actually when I finally get access to them. So yeah, definitely good book. My only negative for this book is there isn't an audio version, but maybe that is because of the way it's laid out, it would actually probably not work as well as an audio version. But I did just put voiceover on my iPad and got Siri to read it to me. So um, nice
Do
little
that.
shortcut.
Can't do that. But no, I think that this is the type of book that I'm not criticizing you for, but I think this is the type of book that should be read rather than listened to. I think that you will gain more from reading rather than listening. Not all books like that, even some non-fiction books. I think you can get as much from by listening. But yeah, I think that my suggestion would be if you get the opportunity to read it rather than listen, especially like Siri, because I can't be doing with that.
To be fair, I do. It's a bit of both. I have it in front of me, so I can see it, but Siri reads it to me because something about just when I'm sat reading, my brain wanders off. And so I realized that I've read like 2 pages and not taken any of it in. So hearing it while seeing it just it makes it go into my mind better. So I I,
Well,
I couldn't. I literally was trying to read it and I kept going. I'm not getting anywhere here. So I was like, no, I've got to turn Siri on.
I am currently reading a book about the science behind what happens and why it's a good thing, but that's another book for another day.
Brilliant. Right, well, thank you for joining me, so I didn't have to talk about this book on my own because that would not have been as fun. And I have no idea what the next book will be, but I will post it on Facebook on your group.
Okay, dokie. Pleasure. I enjoyed reading the book. It was a great shout. I would have preferred it if more. Well, I hope more people read it as a result of listening to this, let's say. But yeah, good shout, and I'm sure you'll do a wise choice next time.
Inspire Instructor Training Book Club. Reading together, growing together.